at the point where we will have our speakers starting to present. So I'd just like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Cathryne Schmitz. She is a professor in the Department of Social Work at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Her focus area is in social work lies in environmental sustainability, global engagement, community building, identity and culture, and interdisciplinary knowledge building, among other areas. She joins us today as an expert in the social work profession in regards to environmental issues and how they connect to social work. She is the co-chair of the Council of Social Work Education's Committee for Environmental Justice, which falls under the Commission for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice. So without further ado, I would like to now welcome Dr. Cathryne Schmitz.
Hello, I'm glad you're all here. I just want to back up and address, people have talked about my role in bringing environmental justice forward. I have to say they're related to two things that have served me well as an advocate. First is to listen. Really keep paying attention and really listen and see where we're going, where we're headed, what we're leaving out, what people want. So that's important. But the other is persistence. It's the most important advocacy skill you can have. I am so persistent. So for 10 years almost, I bugged CSWE to start a committee on environmental justice. Even as we started it, we kind of limped along, and it wasn't until a few months ago we got permission to add new members. So we had dwindled down to 5 members. It was a lot of work. We were very, very active committee, but finally it's now off and running. What I have to say is what's really exciting is that all of our new members and many of our original members are younger faculty coming out of Ph.D. programs where they actually studied this. Many of them did their dissertations related to this. Shenandoah is one of the people that joined the committee and is already making major contributions. So the people that are taking over are so exciting. Keep an eye on the committee, and members this spring are putting together a toolkit, so we hope to have resources up there, and if any of you have resources for us, we would like them. So that, I just want to qualify what my role was and who's really going to lead this forward as we move forward. So just also, I think it's important for you to get a context. As a practicing social worker, I did leadership, I did advocacy, I did community building. So those are the, and change. I've always been involved in watching change, being part of change, and addressing issues that need change. In terms of education, my undergrad is in anthropology, and then my master's and PhD are in social work. So I have always valued putting multiple lenses, and I think that helps as you come to something as complex as environmental issues. So I have not only, I'm a social work faculty first and foremost, but I also have been a faculty and a chair of a peace studies program. And I am an affiliate member of a women gender studies program. I have worked with immigrants and refugees on our campus. So I keep trying to expand what I know and putting other lenses so that I can go beyond some kind of narrow understanding. Perhaps what's most important, though, is to understand I think each of us has a story, how we come to this, why it matters to us, and that's where our passion comes from. At least for me, it comes from that. And so I have to say how I got to environmental issues had a lot to do with who I was. from a young age. I mean, as a child, my life, the joy of my life was the outside. I liked rolling in leaves, I liked climbing trees, I liked picking fruit. I grew up in Los Angeles, so it wasn't Buffalo, so you could do this year round. But being outside was where I got healing. And the same thing as a young mother, my children and I got healing from the environment. I have to say that also, as I began to have kids and be more involved in the community, I became aware of the vulnerability of our environment and of the dangers and what we have to pay attention to. Because so much of what we've done, not just broader issues, but issues like pesticides and what we wear and what we put in our homes are at risk for our families, for our children, for our next generation, all of our children, communally, not just, in our small families. And then my work has always been anti-oppression work and community building. And as I did that, I became more and more aware that it is vulnerable communities that are particularly impacted by our ecology and by our destruction of the environment. And so there was no way I could work in that area without addressing these issues that really impact people significantly and have a differential impact. I've also struggled with how do you share this information? Because if we do it intellectually, we have lots of data. There is no doubt that we are impacting the environment and that climate change is a given. And it is going to have dramatic effects, and we need to address it. But it's an issue that is impacting younger generations more and more, and the younger. When I first started teaching environmental justice, I would say to the students in my class, I'm going to age out before it's really bad, but you're stuck with it. And it may be my generation and previous generations that have gotten us here, but you're going to have to clean it up because you're going to have to live in it. And as much as I'm advocating to get changes, that's slow. And you're going to have to, and they'd say, the environment, it's fine. So I think, how do we get people to feel the passion of it, the urgency of it, not from a place that leaves them so anxious they can't act, but a place that brings them with compassion and empathy to want to heal the environment as a living thing and as a part of their future. So it is an issue for the younger generations. But I think as we approach it, we also need to do it from a place of beauty and a place of heart, because it's not the data that moves people. And so as you think about your own story and why it matters to you, I just want to show a few pictures of the reason of the beauty of the environment, of the world we live in. It's not a statistical thing we're going to throw up in our classes. It is the world around us. And so as you look at these pictures, just think about what feeling does it bring to mind for you, or memory? How do you engage? So I'm just going to show these for a minute. That's my backyard. So if you related to any of that, hold on to that thought, because this is why we need to stay involved. We need to get more involved. And this is how we're going to connect with people. We have to have the data. We have to have that behind us. We have to kind of provide it, but it's not what will engage people. So if you can connect to feelings, to people's stories, to people's compassion, then they are more likely to figure out a way to get involved and stay involved, because it's very personal. So this is a little model that I use. People will talk about the triple bottom line and how the environment overlaps with this, overlaps with that. But in reality, they don't. We're interacting on the environment. The ecology is the world. Our human systems act on top of it. It's not equal. So it is the context within we operate. I hate it when I hear politicians talk about, and sometimes faculty talk about, or students will say, well, we can't afford to deal with it because we're going to leave debt for our children, and they can't afford the debt. Well, you know what? Debt is socially constructed. We forgive countries' debts. We can find a way around debt. Money is a bartering tool. Now, I know it's important. I'm not negating that. But it's not real in the same way that the earth is real, that the context is real, that the water is real. And so what we can't afford to do is destroy the ecology, because they can't get that back. We can deal with economic issues. We cannot deal with losing the earth. We don't have any spares. So it is the ecology that has to be our primary concern. So the earth is not just our environment. We are the earth, and the earth is us. We have always been one with the earth. I have a few pictures now about what is happening and what it means to have degradation of our environment. You remember the iceberg picture from before? This is more of what we're coming to. This is serious. We need to understand water, what it means to not have the icebergs, and how they impact our ecology globally. The Joshua trees in the desert are dying. The polar bears are dying. Their ecology is dying around them. Many of our lands are becoming deserts that were not deserts. The level of floods, the disasters that we have are more and more disastrous, unpredictable. And this shows not only water issues, the local environment, but the impact of vulnerability, isolation, populations that are living on the edge, that are living more and more in environments that are not sustaining life very well. This, I think, is a good picture to think about the wicked problems. How many people have heard of the wicked problems? Okay. So, I urge you to check it out. It's a model that I like to use for something as complex as environmental issues. They are the wicked problems are issues that younger generations have to deal with, and they are so large that we really cannot solve them. And there are no easy ways to engage them. But they are so important that we can't afford to not try and continue trying. Let me get my notes. I'm somebody who can spread all the way across my house, actually. More space I have, the more I spread out. So the wicked problems are also interacting with each other. So So environmental justice is a wicked problem. Climate change is a wicked problem. Environmental degradation is a wicked problem. But they interact with issues of race, of gender, of identity, geography. The global south is feeling the effects of climate change much faster than the north. It's coming. But the global south and has already felt the destruction in the desertification of land, wildlife, loss of habitat, structural violence and systemic oppression. Income inequality is huge. And as I said before, it is those people who are the most vulnerable economically who are the most impacted by environmental degradation and climate change. They also have the least resources for recovering and are the least likely to get resources from recovering. Lack of resources is a primary factor in physical violence of war. On structural violence, again, goes back to lack of resources. And the issues are both local and global, and they interchange. We impact the whole globe, and they impact us. And just by way of a couple of examples, and I'm just going to use a couple. Cathryne, you remember Cathryne? It's a lot of what we saw with Cathryne was maybe not global migration, but internal migration, the displacement of people within their own borders. That it was many of the vulnerable by race, by income, by gender. It's often women and children who were impacted. They were the people that had to leave. They had to leave their homes. They could not rebuild. In fact, much of the property was bought up by people with money. And they couldn't go home. And of course, we know most people want to stay home. People don't want to leave their homes. But they ended up going to other states, some to Houston, who then again were impacted by the hurricanes this year. And of course, the number of hurricanes hitting land at higher classifications is going to continue increasing. And in Houston, already the data is out. Those people with money are recovering. Those people without are not. Many of them have had to walk away from their homes. So again, it goes back to the economics of the issue. And many of those people who were settled in areas that should not have been settled, but they were told it was safe to settle there, were families of color, were single-parent families, were people who didn't have the money to buy in the safer parts of town and weren't informed fully on how dangerous it was to live where they built their homes. And many of them are going to have to leave. And if they rebuild, it will happen again. This is just the beginning. Let's see. So the complexity of the interactions and the response and recovery are all interconnected. And make no mistake, throughout these issues and many others, the violations of human rights are significant, and they're also hidden. So unless we're lucky enough to hear community advocates speak, or we find a way so we learn how to find those voices so that we can continue to follow it, we don't know what's happening. Puerto Rico is a really good example of wicked problems coming together. The devastation there by the hurricanes and the level and where they went. There are parts of the island that are okay. There are parts of the island that will be, for the ecology, decades in recovery. The ecology will recover depending on what happens next in terms of future storms. But many of the people, particularly people without resources, will never recover. And again, you've got people leaving the island, coming to the continent, and because they can't live there. Fortunately, they have family here. They have places to be, and citizenship, of course. So they come here. The byproduct is, if they're living in the continent, one of the states, they can vote. So hopefully they'll get here before the next election, and they'll vote. In Puerto Rico, they don't have the same level of voting. So, so maybe that'll end up creating something positive. But people are still without power, many people. And, you know, the water has been polluted. Without the canopy, you can't save the water. So you don't have groundwater. People don't have what they need to live. I encourage you to check out what's going on in Puerto Rico. And of course, why it is so horrible is because we have a political system and a person at the head who does not like Puerto Ricans. They are people of color as far as they are concerned, and they are not going to respond. And I don't care how horrible the pictures are. They will not respond to those. So, and it's very clearly racism. That even made the national news, so. But some things are recovering. Tourists are coming back. So there is a resilience that happens among humans after disasters. Some people will not, but many people will. Unfortunately, people with money will come back faster and maybe benefit more. But there are some places, particularly in San Juan, where things are opening, people are going, people are enjoying Puerto Rico. But there are many families that are in grave danger. Global migration certainly has a lot to do with environmental degradation, with climate change, with the violence that comes with losing resources. And global migration, often these days you hear about it coming from the south to the north, and some of the language you hear, conservative language, whether in the US or in Europe, has to do with borders, with walls, with keeping people out. And frankly, you can't keep people out if they can't feed their families at home. And so I don't care what we do, people won't stay home if they can't feed their families. People will come, they will find a way. Many of them will die doing that. But the risk is worth it if you can't feed your family or yourself. And what I always tell people is most people would like to stay home. So if you really don't want migration, help people empower themselves and rebuild at home. And they will stay there, and it's cheaper than a border wall. But people will stay home if they can find a way to stay home. Then, of course, on the march, women and children are very vulnerable and often abused repeatedly. So again, you've got that interaction, and then the resettlement. There are costs to the resettlement, and again, the vulnerable communities are the most often impacted. So immigrants who have money, who are European, do better. So that's just a map. So this is just a few pictures of the issues of environmental migration. The kinds of things people are living with and why they have to leave. So change. There are things we do know about change. We do have, particularly social work, I think, we have many ways that we can engage change, that we know about building community, we know about advocacy, we do know about politics and how to engage politics. And all change really begins locally. So I started with a garden picture because one of the ways that we can get involved just very locally as a beginning is community gardens, which of course are also a way that refugees often use for resettlement, immigrants and refugees. So gardening is about health, and it's about sharing community, it's about building community, it's about a way to engage, to begin to build trust and resilience. This is about building bridges, very graphic. But we know about not only working with personal, the interpersonal, the community to build bridges, environmental sustainability, dealing with violence, learning how to transform conflict into something positive. And we need to, which is why we need to spread across disciplines in our work, is that there are closely related disciplines where we can learn about conflict transformation. We can learn about peace building in many ways, and restorative practices, which we really very much need to learn in a lot of ways. There are some strong models for working in a restorative way of dealing with justice issues instead of the kind of punitive systems where we empower and isolate people, or where we imprison and isolate people. There are models out there. Sometimes we don't look globally for models. We think the US has them all. But in fact, vulnerable communities can be way ahead of us in methods for creating change. And so look globally, not for the particulars, but for the process of how you do it. How you embed something and create change has to start with your own community. But the processes and the development process and some of the principles can actually be transported from place to place. So this is EcoViva, which is about building community-led initiatives for sustainable futures in Mesoamerica. There's a number of models they use. You can easily find their website and look through. But EcoViva starts with listening to the story, starting local, and figuring out what's underneath. How did we get here, and therefore how can we change? It's with the understanding that you cannot build sustainable change unless it's just change, and unless it's connected to local history, local mechanisms, local ecology. You have to rebuild the ecology sustainably as you rebuild your communities. As we rebuild the ecology, we rebuild human health. This is another sustainability and peace building in Mesoamerica. And change that lasts is nonviolent change. It is about sustainability. Violence does not create lasting change. This takes us back. We've talked a lot about water, which is important in most of these. But rebuilding our forests, and forests that are indigenous to the area, rebuilds our water systems, rebuilds our connections, protects the environment, and the process of doing it is a process of building community. These are the mangrove forests. This is also about rebuilding our water systems. We have to protect our water systems and our sanitation. Sometimes we forget we have natural partners that we could bring back into our communities that are much better than us at rebuilding local streams. And they will do it much faster than humans can. And they're adorable, and they're nonviolent. And they build little communities for all sorts of wildlife. So, of course, I like wildlife. I have many of them, my own. But we forget that there are partners out there that we can bring back that will do much of the work for us. I have time, I think, to show my longer video. Do you want to help me bring up one of my videos? So I want to bring up a video. Does anybody know the Greenbelt movement or Wangari Maathai? Yes. So I want to show, I've got an 8-minute clip about it. I didn't know if I'd have enough time to show it, but I do want to show it. There's a long video, I can give you the name at the end.
I think that it is very, very important to continue encouraging our governments and ourselves that the environment is not really an issue for tomorrow. The environment is everyday issue. It's the air we breathe.
I encourage you to look up Wangari Maathai. She's an incredible global leader, and I'll say a little bit more about her after, but I think I'd like her to speak, first of all, from her voice.
I think that it is very, very important to continue encouraging our governments and ourselves that the environment is not really an issue for tomorrow. The environment is everyday issue. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It's the food we eat. And we can't live without these things. The biggest challenge is governance, because the people at the top have power. Because they have power, they have control of resources, they have a lot of privileges, and they can continue to increase these privileges from where they sit. And the public at the grassroots can continue to suffer. I could see that the top is very heavy, and changing the top is very, very difficult. And changing the top, if you don't have the grassroots, is almost impossible. So what we did in the Greenbelt movement was to go to those grassroots, those bottom, and instead of trickling down, go to them and say, maybe should be a trickle up. Is the tree. A tree has a personality, and as it grows and it changes the landscape, it also seems to change the minds of the people, and it brings with it a certain rapport that actually encourages people to do more. So that you start with a few farmers, and before you know, so many other farmers want to also participate.
Tagore Diagade na the Green Volunteer. Ne ndaithagĩrĩria atumia ku form groups na kũmonia ũrĩa tree nursery ĩformagwo. Nĩ twĩkĩrĩte maratathi tĩri rĩu na tũkawota mbegũ icio tũgaciĩkĩra maĩ. At the same time nĩ tũrekĩra maratathi tĩri na kũmabanga kũrĩa transplant seedlings.
This area, before conservation, it was very much degraded. You can see now the seedlings that the trees that we have planted. In the whole of this area, we have planted about 1 million seedlings. Before we came in, people used to cut trees, even the small ones that were there. So with this kind of slope, the erosion was very severe. Now you can see the change. The area looks green. It is very green. Look at the river, it's clean because there's no erosion. So the community will have clean water.
I have always seen poverty as having two sides to it. Poverty will cause environmental degradation because, as I sometimes do, a poor person will cut their last tree to cook what may be their last meal. They're not worried about tomorrow. They're worried about today. On the other hand, it is very important for poor people to understand that the more you the more you degrade your environment, the more you mismanage your environment, the more you are likely to dig yourself deeper into poverty.
Nĩ hakinyĩte handũ kĩrĩma nĩ ũndũ wa gũthũkangio mũno, maĩ magatuĩka rĩu matingiuma na kũu thĩ, koguo karũĩ nĩ gatuĩkĩte nĩ gegũthira. No kuma rĩrĩa tuonire ũguo na tũkĩambĩrĩria kũhanda mĩtĩ mwaka wa 2000 nĩ tuonete improvement na mũno makĩria maĩ nĩ mambatĩrire na hinya mũno nginya atĩ ona nĩ kapindaga makĩria ma andũ 5,000 around na hatirĩ rũĩ rũngĩ rũkoretwo rĩu rũgĩikara ta ũrĩa Kadima ĩikarĩte.
Now, because we were dealing with the poor people, we also wanted to give them an income. But we were keen not to be seen as coming with a bowl of money to give, a bag of money to give away. So we said, you plant the tree. If you make it survive, we will give you a token of appreciation. And I emphasize that because you can't pay for all that work. We didn't have that kind of money. They can actually make enough money which they can invest. And we encourage them to invest in income generating activities. So because in many ways you are trying to improve the quality of life.
Ya kuhanda mĩtĩ henjeci-inĩ cia mũgũnda na ya graveria wambere mbegũ nĩ cionekaga na ihenya. Through this nĩ tũthondekete mbeca cia mbaũ more than 100 kĩmũciĩ wakorwo ũtarĩ na strain ya mũtũrĩre. Operate nĩ magĩũcokete magoka makarehe ithomo ici ingĩ cia magatũhe kind of loan magatũ supply na mĩatũ nigetha twarĩkia kũiga tũkĩrĩ tũgacoka tũkendia ũkĩ rĩu income ĩyo yũkaga gĩkundi-inĩ. Mbũri ici nĩ ibridĩtwo kuma Germany, koguo nĩ irĩ iria rĩingĩ na nĩ resistant na mĩrimũ tondũ koguo twa investire mbeca harĩ mbũri ĩrĩa twambĩrĩirie nayo na nĩ hotete kũrehe mbeca nyingĩ mũno makĩria kuma 1996 rĩrĩa twaingĩrire group-inĩ ya mbũri. Out of mbeca iria twaheanĩte ikahanda mĩtĩ twareherwo tũkĩgũra mbũri.
To work with the communities, you need passion. You need to really want to do that, because otherwise they can be a nuisance and you can be in a hurry because you want them to change like yesterday. Quite often we get people who are educated, they have big ideas, but they want these people to change overnight. They can't. And if you push them too much, they will do it while you are there, and once you pull back, they collapse. So it's always good to hear that there is somebody somewhere, we are no longer in touch, and this person is still going on with their project. They are now able to stand on their own. They can truly say they have improved their quality of life. And it all started with planting that one tree.
about her story, what she brought. So because she grew up before the degradation, she had indigenous knowledge of what was healthy, what was there, what the community was like, what people believed, which as the forest was destroyed, people forgot their beliefs. So she brought that. She also was educated in Catholic schools, which added a layer to what she knew. Oh dear, sorry. Thank you. So she added a layer with that, and then she came to the U.S. and got undergraduate and master's degrees, and also she began to speak out, and she discovered she had voice to speak. She went back, got her Ph.D., University of Nairobi. She did get married. It turns out she'd forgotten how to be a, as she says, an African wife. She was not willing to hold her tongue. So the marriage ended after about 10 years. But she paid a cost for having voice, and there is a cost sometimes to using your voice. She, though, took what she learned. She was actually the first woman in East Africa to get a Ph.D. And she had a university position and was the first woman chair of a department. And she lost that. She got a divorce. She went into poverty. She had a few small children and was pretty devastated. But like so many of us, she's resilient. And so if you have your voice, you can't be kept down too long. And so as she came out of that, she became a community builder. And that's when she started with the women in the community who were asking for it, talking about poverty, not being able to feed their children. And she also saw that when she was a child, there was a tree that was the center of the community, a fig tree, that nobody bothered. That had been cut down, and when that was cut down, the water went away, the forest went away, and it destroyed the whole ecology. So she had a vision of how to get back to that. She recognized that the community knowledge in that process was replaced with the Bible, and so she brought back in community knowledge and beliefs. And that's how they approached the Greenbelt movement. She was very outspoken, as I said, and moved forward and understood politics, but she understood the need to think backwards as well as forwards. So as they moved forward with the forests and the rebuilding, she also said, but this is a symptom. Where did it start? And as she traced back, it went back to colonialism. And so they began a process of developing their community to understand politics, voice, civic dialogue. And so the community began to organize itself and have talks. And everybody started to get involved. She started activism about a park that the government was going to take away, that Kenya got freedom, sort of, from Great Britain in '63, but of course the people who became leaders were the elite who continued to pillage the environment and the people. But she stood up to them. And as she stood up to them, people pulled back from her because they were afraid. They were going to face the violence she was facing as she stood up to them. But she continued. And so the Greenbelt started in '77. They saved the park in '89, at which point people saw that she could make a change, and they came back to her. And the movement started growing from that point. In '92, they got free elections, and in 2002, they got rid of the dictator. So change takes time. It takes decades. It's not a short-term thing. And it's about resilience and continuing to move forward, because things do pay off. And if you look at nonviolent movements, they're much more effective than violent movements. And if you can get 3% of the population behind you, maybe even less, that it will succeed. So it is a much higher possibility of succeeding than violent conflict. And hers clearly was nonviolence. This is as it is today. You saw in the video how it was, but they have farms now, and they keep it going. And these are the women at a community meeting. After they got rid of Moy, she did get into Parliament eventually. She'd been trying to get in and couldn't get in, but once he was gone, she was in Parliament. And they have made major changes in the government and across time. And one of the things they did was educate the army to save the plants. So they engaged everybody in the Green Belt movement, and which became a global movement. I like the model, but I think even the other piece of this, I'm sorry, that I didn't mention, which you see in the full video, is the gender depression. I mean, you saw the elites and income equality, but the gendered oppression. She was insulted by the government. She was threatened as a woman, and people were afraid to stand with her because she was a woman. And all of that changed. So these things come together and change together. Communities have to empower on all those levels to create sustainable change. I just want to give a few more examples. Dolores Huerta. It's just a few of her quotes, but I encourage you to look at her. She organized the United Farm Workers Union along with Cesar Chavez. She was, in fact, probably a more dedicated leader than he was, but the world credits him. Again, you've got gendered impression in that. And when he died, rather than having her as the leader, they put another man in, at which point she left and became a community organizer. And in her community organizer, she went back to just going to local neighborhoods, bringing people together, and she brought together issues of race, of gender, of environmental justice as part of one movement, not separate movements. But I encourage you to look at it. Actually, there's a video out right now by PBS called Dolores, and until April 24th, you can download it for free and watch it. So it's pretty easy to find. I encourage you to look at that. But you will see the level of violence. So nonviolence, as we know from Martin Luther King Jr., there's a violent reaction to it. But in standing to that, you can get to the other side of it. And if you respond with violence, you cannot. So, but nonviolence is very frightening for leaders. Refugees often, and immigrants, will rebuild many of our local struggling communities. In Lewiston, Maine, there were the Somalis. A lot of Somalis went to Lewiston, Maine to resettle. And early on, there was the mayor, some leaders in the community, he became mayor, but he used racism to become mayor. There was so there was a lot of fear that grew and outside groups that came in and stirred up racism, and it got quite violent. What we often focus on is that, but in fact from day one there were local people, local communities, local groups that bonded with Somalis, that protected the Somalis, that build community with the Somalis. So we need to make sure we look at the allies, that we don't negate their work. Allies deserve nurturing because they are how you begin to build a movement that grows and grows and grows. The Somalis, Lewiston was struggling terribly. It was an old mill town, and the mills had gone away, so it was struggling from poverty, isolation. And the Somalis have helped rebuild that whole community. And part of it is that they have grown things, they have taught people how to grow things, they have started small businesses, they're entrepreneurs. So the community has acquired a lot of health. But it goes up and down. So there's the structural systemic violence that comes, but you have to keep moving forward. So too often when we have the first setback, we back off, but that's when you really need to keep moving forward. And so there were consistency across all those projects. One is to start local and to listen to people and to have people tell you where you need to start in your community. What's the most important issue for this community? And begin to understand that within a global context. So it's local, but it's also global. So and the rebuilding needs to understand the larger context. It's also addressing issues of income inequality, of racism, of gender issues. More and more, we're recognizing how much our history of women has been lost. It's not written down. And women across the world, their history, activists and organizers, have been lost. I think even the New York Times is now running a series on women whose voices were lost. I think they did it today on a young woman in Korea. So, but we lose voices of women and people of color. And that's pretty clear just from most of our history books. So, expanding our voice, learning to listen, learning to pay attention, and being optimistic is really important. We cannot keep doing this if we can't believe in the long-term possibilities. So we have to be optimistic in some ways, which doesn't mean that we don't at the moment take a strong stand. So I want to show you a short clip on optimism and being engaged, and then maybe talk a little bit, ask questions. So, thank you. Hummingbird. When I saw this one the first time, I saw Wangari Maathai speak, and she said, "This is truly a global story. I'm an African woman. I learned this story in Japan, and I'm now in North Carolina presenting it." But somebody's now made it fancier, so we'll look at the fancy version. Nope, not that one.
I was hearing many rural women come.
Yeah, the hummingbird.
I have said several times I'm concluding, but let me conclude with a little story that I like to give, because I've talked about a lot of issues. I know you are very well informed and you probably think, what can we do? I like to tell a story of a hummingbird. I don't know how many of you have heard me tell about the hummingbird, but I like to tell about the story of a hummingbird because quite often we feel overwhelmed. So this story of a hummingbird, which I learned from Japan, is the story of a forest that caught fire. And it was a huge fire. And it was raging. And all the animals came out of the forest and stood by the edge of the forest. And they were watching the fire. They were very overwhelmed. They were powerless. They felt like there was nothing they could do because the problem was too much for them. Except this little hummingbird. The hummingbird said, I'm going to do something about the fire. So it flew to the nearest stream, took a drop of water, and flew back and put it on the fire. Then back again, brought another drop of water and put it on the fire. And it kept going as fast as it could, every time bringing a drop of water and putting it on the fire. In the meantime, all these animals are discouraging it and are persuading it not to bother because it is too little, You have a beak is too little, you are bringing very little water, and some of the animals that are talking like that are the elephants with the big trunks, which could bring much more water, but the hummingbird just kept doing what it knew best without wasting any time. And to stop them when they said, "What do you think you are doing?" And the hummingbird said, "I'm doing the best I can." And for me, and I hope for you, that's all we can do. Whoever we are, wherever we are, there is something in our lives that we can do. No matter how small it is, collectively, it will make a difference. So be a hummingbird in your community, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
So I like to end with that because it's true. We all have, there's so much to do. We have to find a place to be involved that fits us, where we have a passion, where we have something to contribute, where it fits with our story or our community. None of us can take it all on, but where do we fit in to the process of change? Questions, comments, thoughts? Yes?
Well, I was expecting in the story that hopefully some of the elephants and the other animals that were just, you know, saying why bother, that they say, well, then let's,
Yep.
you know, get behind her. And then, you know, that's where, as you said, it's the collective action.
Yep, absolutely. That's the next step.
Yeah.
So maybe one of us needs to go do that.
Encourage each other.
Yep.
Somebody says that the responsibility of the activist or the social worker at
Yeah.
any time is to have hope.
Yes. Yes, and to take action.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you ended with that. That was nice. So I learned recently about this podcast called Today Explained, which I think is just great. And last night I listened to one of the podcasts, and they're all brief, but they're very comprehensive in how they put the story together, about Cape Town and how Cape Town is running out of
water.
And it is disproportionately affecting poorer people than rich people right now. The rich folks still have water in their swimming pools and their lawns are still green, but they're rationing water.
Yeah.
But they, of course, have the resources to build themselves barrels and, you know, collect water in other ways and dig extra holes. But it's really a crisis because of the long-term drought
Yes.
that's been happening.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It was interesting. In Greensboro, when I first got there, we had a drought that year. And they were rationing water. Well, I actually lived outside the city, so I was on a well. And and the people outside the city are dependent on those wells. If those wells get dry, people are in big trouble. And in the city, the people with the big lawns and the golf courses dug wells so that they didn't have to stop watering because they were monitored on the city. So they were taking water that was needed for other things, and they were getting around the limitations on water use. And that happens frequently, unfortunately.
Another thought, as you know, hearing Wangari's story again, is that she really connects all the different issues. So all the
Yes.
issues are connected.
Yes.
And so also the solutions are connected.
Yes.
In a way that's really, really wonderful.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah.
Once you really recognize, you know,
Yeah.
how, and that's the beauty of what she managed to do.
Yes. One of the wonderful stories is that she, the women, not just her, they came together. Many of their sons were imprisoned because they were activists. And so they did a hunger strike and in the Peace Garden for 11 months. But eventually their sons were turned free. Now, a couple of them the government later killed, but most of them were freed. And they used indigenous methods to safeguard themselves when the government was starting to beat them up. So they used the local knowledge to create change that worked for them. Well, I encourage you, books are great, but they take a long time. There's a Wangari Maathai's, and I think you can actually even watch it online, but if not, it's pretty reasonable. But Al Gore's helpful. I know people say stuff, but in fact, he's got all the data. And it's an easy way to get data out. Friedman's books on The World is Flat, and I think there's a couple of updates, those are useful. They actually use language that people understand, and they pull the issues together in a very readable format, you know. Our academic books often chase people away. They're hard to understand, but there's some pretty concrete ways to do it. Dolores is a great movie. I know some movies about the issues with the Somalis in Lewiston. So there are a lot of resources out there that actually are fun ways to learn. The other thing is use museums. There's some incredible museums in the U.S. Drive around, look at them. It's a good way to travel. Yes?
I just say the reason Wangari Maathai is, of course, very famous, but she's also, as a Nobel Peace Laureate, she is one of the Peace Jam's, she was on their board. So the board, you know, of Peace Jam has a number of different, you know, say 13 laureates.
Wow.
Not that all laureates are created equal, I wouldn't say that.
Right.
But anyway, that they are just 13 really wonderful persons, and in each case, you know, when you look at how they got it, most times there was this sort of multiplicity of effects of the things that they did, like Adolfo Perez Esquivel, who's now started some intentional communities, especially for young people in Argentina. Mm-hmm. Although that was something that he started doing after he got it.
Yeah. And there's more and more women who are recognized. I mean, it's not a huge number yet, so we can probably find their names quickly. But women are very instrumental in peace building and ending wars. So Lema Gobi, who is a social worker and has a degree in peace building, so she's got both. So I encourage you to go find those, because there's lessons in those.
And just a comment, we had Wangari Maathai here as a distinguished speaker.
Wow.
A few years ago. So yeah,
that's great.
Inspiring.
Now you need to get Lema Gobi. Lema Gobi.
Oh, yes.
You've got to get her. She's pretty amazing. And she's a social worker, so. But, yes, and her story's pretty amazing, so I encourage you. And again, it's about government. Why I'm blanking it, I'm terrible with names, but she actually was one of the major leaders in ending the war in Liberia. And they used, again, indigenous methods, and they brought women together across religions. She, after they stopped the brutality, the woman who became the president, she originally didn't trust, because she had supported Charles, somebody, he went into South Sudan, anyways, thank you. And so she had to rebuild the trust of the women, because we all can make bad decisions. So it's a lesson to don't cut people off because they make some bad decisions. They can also end up being allies. But they have built a process, and both of those women, by the way, have gotten peace prizes. But they built a process where the women evaluate her as the leader every year. And she requests it to keep herself in line. You know, if you're ever a leader, you need, 1, be humble, and 2, make sure you get feedback that doesn't give you good news. If you're always getting good news, you're doing something wrong. People are afraid of you. So there we have women's history. Well, thank you.